Have you ever wondered why Japan, a country thousands of miles away, would attack Pearl Harbor, leading America into the Second World War? It's a question that has puzzled many throughout the years. A peaceful Sunday morning in December, suddenly shattered by the roar of aircraft engines and the devastating explosions of torpedoes. But let's put the pieces of this intricate puzzle together. Picture this: the world in the early 20th century. A time of rapid change and escalating tensions. To the east, the land of the rising sun, Japan, a nation eager to expand its territories and influence. To the west, the United States, a sleeping giant, content in its isolation yet wary of the growing threats abroad. The two nations were locked in a delicate dance of diplomacy, each trying to protect its own interests. The United States, a powerhouse of industry and resources, had what Japan desperately needed to fuel its ambitious expansion: oil, steel, and other crucial materials. But the US was not ready to share its bounty without conditions, and Japan was not willing to bow down to those demands. The global stage was set for a confrontation, but no one could predict how far it would go. The attack on Pearl Harbor was not a random act of aggression, but a calculated move, born out of desperation and strategic necessity. It was an attempt to cripple the US Pacific Fleet, to buy time for Japan to secure its new territories without interference. But why Pearl Harbor? Why not attack the mainland directly? Well, Pearl Harbor was like a hornet's nest, home to the majority of the US Pacific Fleet. Striking there was a gamble, a risky one, but if successful, it could have given Japan the upper hand. So to understand the reasons, we need to step back into the past. A journey into the annals of history, where we'll unravel the complex web of events leading to that fateful day. So, buckle up as we dive into the depths of an unexpected twist in the tale of Pearl Harbor. Our story begins in the 1930s, in a world very different from ours. A world gripped by economic hardship and political uncertainty. A world where nations vied for influence and power. One such nation was Japan, an island country with big dreams and even bigger ambitions. Japan during this period was a growing empire. It was an era marked by the country's imperialistic ambitions that stretched far beyond its own borders. Japan had its eyes on the vast resources and territories of its neighboring countries. A dream was taking shape. A dream of a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, where Japan would lead Asia against Western influence. In line with this expansionist goal, Japan set its sights on China. In 1931, it invaded Manchuria, a resource-rich region in northern China. This invasion marked the beginning of a long and brutal war, a war that would last for over a decade and claim millions of lives. But Japan's actions didn't go unnoticed. The United States, a staunch advocate of peace and stability in the Pacific, was watching closely. The invasion of China was a blatant violation of international law and the principles of peace. The US, along with other Western powers, condemned Japan's aggression and began imposing economic sanctions. These sanctions hit Japan hard. They cut off its access to crucial resources like oil and steel, resources that were vital for its war machine. Japan found itself cornered, its dreams of empire threatened. But instead of backing down, Japan dug in its heels. The country felt it had no choice but to secure these resources by any means necessary, even if it meant going to war with the United States. These were the seeds of conflict, sown in a decade of ambition and aggression. And as the 30s drew to a close, the world watched in trepidation. As these tensions escalated, as the drums of war grew louder, these tensions were about to reach a boiling point. In 1940, something happened that changed everything. A decision was made across the Pacific that would set the stage for one of the most infamous days in American history. The United States, concerned by Japan's aggressive actions in Asia, decided to impose an embargo on Japan. The embargo was a powerful tool, more potent than any weapon. It was like a slow strangling, a tightening grip around Japan's economy. The United States was a major supplier of oil, steel, and iron to Japan, resources that were vital for Japan's industry and military. With the embargo in place, these resources became scarce, and Japan was left gasping for breath. Imagine being in a room where the walls are closing in. That's how Japan felt. They were a nation with ambitions, with dreams of expanding their empire, but suddenly they found themselves backed into a corner. No oil to fuel their ships, no steel to build their weapons, no iron to make their machines. What were they to do? The embargo was not just affecting their economy, it was crippling their military, the heart and soul of their expansionist ambitions. And it wasn't just about resources. It was about pride, about honor. Japan felt humiliated, cornered by a nation they saw as meddling in their affairs. The embargo was a slap in the face, a challenge, a dare. It was the United States saying, "What are you going to do about it?" Japan was running out of time. Every day the embargo continued, their situation grew more desperate. They were like a wounded animal, cornered and dangerous. And a wounded animal, when cornered, fights back. Japan was not just fighting for resources now. They were fighting for their honor, for their place in the world. They were fighting to show they would not be bullied, would not be cornered, would not be strangled. And so, they made a decision. A decision that would change the world. A decision that would lead to a day that would live in infamy. And so, Japan made a decision that would change the world forever. In the volatile world of the 1940s, Japan found itself at a crossroads. The nation, eager to expand its territory and power, was facing a significant obstacle: the United States. The US, a global superpower, had imposed economic sanctions on Japan, crippling its economy and hindering its ambitions. It was clear that something had to be done, but what? The Japanese leaders knew that challenging the US would be a risky move, but they also believed that they had no other option. It was a choice between yielding to US demands and losing face, or fighting for what they thought was rightfully theirs. In the end, they chose the latter. But why attack Pearl Harbor? Why not strike elsewhere? The reason was strategic. Pearl Harbor was home to the US Pacific Fleet, the main force that stood between Japan and its Pacific ambitions. By launching a surprise attack, Japan aimed to cripple this fleet, buying itself time to consolidate its gains before the US could mount a counter-offensive. The planning of the attack was meticulous. Under the leadership of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the Japanese forces trained in secrecy. They studied the harbor, its defenses and its vulnerabilities. They rehearsed their attack strategies over and over until they were confident they could execute them flawlessly. It was a daring plan, one that required precision, courage, and a bit of luck. As the day of the attack neared, tension rose. The Japanese knew that they were about to embark on a dangerous mission, one that could either make or break their empire. There were doubts, fears, and second thoughts, but in the end they decided to proceed. They believed that it was a risk worth taking, a gamble that could potentially pay off in a big way. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched its attack. The world watched in shock as the events unfolded. It was a day that would live in infamy, a day that marked the beginning of a war that would change the course of history. But that's a story for another time. On a quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii, history was about to be made. The date was December 7, 1941, a day that would live in infamy. Imagine a peaceful paradise, serene and tranquil. Then, out of nowhere, the deafening roar of airplane engines shatters the calm. The sky, once a clear, radiant blue, now darkened by hundreds of Japanese fighter planes. The attack was swift, brutal, and entirely unexpected. Pearl Harbor, the pride of the Pacific Fleet, was under siege. Battleships, once formidable and unyielding, were now vulnerable targets. The USS Arizona, the USS Oklahoma, the USS West Virginia. These mighty vessels were struck, one after another. In a matter of hours, 18 ships were sunk or severely damaged. The damage wasn't just to the ships. The human cost was equally devastating. Over 2,000 American servicemen and women lost their lives that day, with another 1,000 injured. The devastation was unimaginable. The loss, immeasurable. The American response was immediate. Shock quickly gave way to resolve. The nation, once divided over its role in the ongoing global conflict, was now united. The United States, a sleeping giant, had been awoken. President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed the nation the very next day. His words echoed the sentiments of every American, of outrage, of sorrow, but above all, of determination. He declared December 7th to be a date which will live in infamy, and sought a declaration of war against Japan from Congress, a request that was almost unanimously granted. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked a turning point not just in American history, but in world history. It was the spark that ignited the United States' full entry into the Second World War. No longer would they stand by and watch. America was now at war. In the aftermath of the attack, the world would never be the same. This chilling statement rings true as we delve into the events that unfolded following the attack on Pearl Harbor. Picture this. A nation, once resolute in its neutrality, was suddenly thrust into the chaos of World War II. The United States, shocked and angered by the surprise attack, could no longer stand by on the sidelines. On December 8th, the very next day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before Congress and delivered his famous Day of Infamy speech. He called the attack a date which will live in infamy and asked Congress to declare war on Japan. The response was swift and unanimous. For the first time since the War of 1812, America was at war with a foreign power. America's entry into the war had a global impact. It shifted the balance of power and marked the beginning of the end for the Axis powers. The United States, with its industrial might and vast resources, was a formidable opponent. The Allies now had a powerful new ally, and the tide of the war began to turn. But the aftermath of Pearl Harbor was not just about global politics. It was also about personal loss and national grief. Thousands of lives were lost in the attack and the nation mourned. Yet, in the midst of sorrow, a sense of unity and determination emerged. Americans from all walks of life came together to support the war effort, demonstrating the resilience and courage of a nation under fire. And so, in the wake of devastation, a new chapter in world history began. The attack on Pearl Harbor was more than just a military operation. It was a catalyst that changed the course of history. It propelled the United States onto the world stage as a major player and set the stage for a new era in international relations. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a turning point in history. It was a moment that forever changed the world, and its aftermath still reverberates today. So what can we learn from this story? As we reflect on the series of events that led to the attack on Pearl Harbor, we can start to piece together a mosaic of lessons to take away. Firstly, we see the importance of understanding and respecting the perspectives of others. The seeds of conflict were sown due to a clash of interests and ambitions. Japan, feeling cornered and threatened, felt that its only choice was to lash out. While this doesn't excuse their actions, it provides a lens to view the situation and understand how desperation can drive a nation to extreme measures. Secondly, we come to appreciate the value of diplomatic negotiations and peace talks. When communication breaks down, as it did in the point of no return, the path to conflict becomes inevitable. It's a stark reminder that dialogue, understanding, and compromise are key in maintaining peace. The decision to attack brings us to our third lesson: the cost of misjudgments and miscalculations. Japan believed that the strike would cripple the United States Pacific Fleet and deter them from interfering in their expansionist plans. Instead, it galvanized the American public and led the United States to enter World War II, ultimately leading to Japan's defeat. The Day of Infamy and the aftermath highlight the human cost of war. Lives were lost, families were torn apart, and nations were left to pick up the pieces. It's a grim reminder of the devastating impact of war and the importance of striving for peace. So, as we delve into history, we learn not only about the events themselves, but about the decisions, misunderstandings, and miscalculations that can lead to such catastrophic outcomes. We're reminded of the importance of understanding communication and peace. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching. And hopefully, I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe and share.